All right, here we go. Got on my Hook 25 shirt. Got all my ice cubes. So, hey, welcome everybody. On the agenda tonight, I want to talk a little bit about some of the things that I read in the KC-46 Accident Investigation Board reports. They published 3 of them about a week ago. And I'll have to bring them up on my phone. But it's kind of weird, to tell you the truth, you know. I'm reading them and I'm like, this doesn't make sense. They blame the boom operators. Preponderance of the evidence says the boom operators and the receivers. As we all know, there's a number of Category 1 issues with the KC-46 boom. And the remote vision system is probably the biggest one. And hey, Wayne, how you doing? Welcome back tonight, brother. Talking about the KC-46 boom and these reports that came out. And I'm just saying it just seems kind of weird to me. I'm like, reading these things and I'm like, something doesn't make sense here. I'm not sure what it is, guys. And maybe I need to read them a lot closer. I'm not sure. But they blame the boom operators for not doing the breakaways and getting the boom out of the way and everything on a boom that we know is stiff, has a remote vision system problem, and has some kind of, geez, I don't even know what you call it, weird logic in it. Hey, Tommy, welcome back. And the really odd thing is it's with fighters. Let's see. Two of the reports were, I think, F-22s. One was F-15E. The F-15E was last August. And the system messed up the refueling receptacle. The incident, I shouldn't say system, the incident messed up their refueling receptacle, and they had to land. And when they tried to land at Fresno, that was problematic. And they actually landed and didn't catch the barrier, ended up having to go to Lemoore. And I think they landed with like 1,200 pounds in the tanks or something like that. I mean, it was not a lot of gas, particularly for an airplane that's burning about 200,000 or about 200 pounds a minute from each engine, you know? So, excuse me. So, hey, Wayne, Tommy, the lighting on my monitor is kind of dark. Tell me if it is dark on your side too, okay? One's ready? No, I haven't. Pretty good channel about Air Force news. Run by some sold Air Force guys. Yeah, I will. Okay, hang on just a second. Let me fix this. I don't know why, but that seems to, well, it doesn't do much for the background, does it? Let me just do it just like that. Had some weird weather here in Utah. It's been, hey, Robert, welcome. Anyway, What's going on here? Hang on, guys. Hello. Oh, there's thumbprints all over the front of this thing. Hang on just a second, guys. Sorry, little housekeeping. Oh, yeah. That's a little bit better. Anyway. Yeah, I've heard about what happened in Oklahoma. Hey, Robert, welcome. So, I'm kind of thinking, what's going on with this? And Brits, welcome. The KC-46 is, our future tanker airplane. And as all of you saw, the DOD has said, Department of Defense, soon to be the Department of War, has said, we're not going to have another competition. It's going to be KC-46s. I get that. But a lot of people are like going, why is that? Why aren't they going to have another competition? They've got to fix this, So the reports say, the booms didn't react in time and the airplanes didn't react appropriately on a boom that's had a number of issues. But that's what's in the report. You can go find these things. And hey, Brian, welcome. Thanks for the good words there. You can go find these things, and I'll when I do one of the shorts tonight, I've got some really, really incredible pictures of the latest boom incident where it came off when they were doing F-22s, and you can see the extension chain hanging down and all kinds of crazy thing. Yeah, Wayne, exactly. Blame everything but the design. But you know what, Wayne? It's looking more and more like they just need to redesign that whole system. They have remote vision system too. I've flown the boom simulator that they bring to, all the conventions. Looks great in color, no problem. Nothing about sun angle or anything like that. And they keep saying, well, it got pushed back to 2027. Why? Why did it get pushed back? I don't know. There's just some weird things going on, man. Brian, they had an upgrade for the autopilot back in 1991 during Desert Storm. We were flying a lot of our missions with the autopilot off, and that was very uncomfortable, particularly for the first couple nights. Yeah, tell me how it works 3 weeks into a deployment. Exactly. And like I said, Wayne, I just got finished talking to all the Navy bubbas at Tailhook, and I asked them specifically. I said, did you just refuel off of the 135s? And I said, no, it was a mix of 135s and KC-46s. So it's like, what's going on? They put a new digital autopilot into the airplane when they did the Pacer Crag modification to all the jets. The Pacer Crag modification was Crag stood for what is it? Compass, radar, autopilot, and GPS. And that's when they took the nav out of the cockpit. And of course, now, the GPS systems are really good. But Brian, during the first Gulf War, for a while there, we couldn't fly autopilot on, particularly the pitch axis or the altitude hold, because it would it'd burp every once in a while, and the airplane would go like this, okay, and that's not what you want, Brian, when you've got airplanes behind you refueling, to just be going along and all of a sudden the airplane just kind of go like this, and they did a fleet-wide upgrade on them, but for like the first month of Desert Storm, we were flying with the altitude hold off and flying manually. With fighters, it's not that big a deal. They don't, the fighters just don't influence our airplanes that much, all right, because they're small. But man, when you do it with a C5 or a C-141 or a C-17, yeah, it gets your attention. And I've told you guys before, the boom operator calls every 10 feet from the pre-contact position, 50 feet. He's at 50, he's at 40, he's at 30, he's at 20, because you go boop, boop, boop with the trim, electronic trim, boop, boop, boop. 3 dits of trim every 10 feet, okay? And it trims the airplane out. And when the autopilot's on, that's about what it does. You'll see it go whoop, 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 as the thing moves in, as the C5 moves in. And so that's where that comes from, 3 dits of trim. 1, 2, 3. About that fast too. Maybe a little slower. 1, 2, 3. Okay, he's at 40 feet. 1, 2, 3. Okay, he's at 30 feet. 1, 2, 3. And the other crazy thing is, if the C5 backs out too fast, it sucks us down into him. The what did Michelle call it? The Venturi effect actually brings us together. So you got to be careful. And if the C5 underruns us, it causes our nose to the tail goes up and the nose goes down. Well, you know what happens when the tail goes up and the nose goes down? We collide. But you know what's crazy? I've never heard of any, I'm thinking real hard here. I've never heard of any accidents with a C5 air refueling. There's been a whole bunch of them, obviously, the B-52. I had one. I had they call it uncontrolled brute force disconnect, unscheduled brute force disconnect with a Saudi F-15. Snapped the nozzle right off. And, it happens. The Saudis just weren't that proficient in air refueling. As time went on, they were very proficient. Yeah, you're right. You're right. You're correct, Wayne. It's like, mini me is at the bar. But boy, I tell you, man, when you're doing autopilot off air refueling with a C5, yeah, you know it. And you know what? I never remember, let me make sure of this. I never once refueled a C5 in a racetrack, an orbit. It was always a long track. And that's usually because the C5 was going somewhere, A very good friend of mine flew nonstop from Dover, Delaware to Mogadishu, refueled going through Gibraltar. 3 tankers, all of them out of Marone. All of them gave him 100,000 pounds. No, excuse me, 80,000 pounds. It was 240,000 pounds. They put 240,000 pounds out of 3 KC-135s into his jet on his way to Mogadishu. They were very heavy. They had a lot of stuff in the back. And this was when the Black Hawk Down situation happened, So I think he said he was on the boom for an hour and 5 minutes. Think about that. That's a long time to be connected. So, Andrew, welcome. Do I ever talk about conspiracies? That's a good question. Okay. Because people have called me a conspiracy theorist. The problem is, Andrew, all of my conspiracies are coming true. But and there's a lot of conspiracy theories with UFOs, and folks, I've never had any contact with a UFO during the time that I was flying. I've had friends that have, and you know what? It seems like we're seeing more and more of them. Did you see that triangular one somebody took video of the other day? I can't remember where. I think it may have been Arizona, where I mean it was just it looked like it was huge. Okay. Um, I've refueled a lot of F-111s. Okay. Supreme Eater, welcome back. Crazy. I've refueled a lot of F-111s. My first base of assignment was at Pease Air Force Base, which is an FB-111 base. So not conventional weapons, nuclear weapons. Okay. And man, that thing was fast. They talk about how fast the F-111s were. You really don't know until you see one, with the with the throttles up. We did this exercise. It was called Global Guardian. It was Strategic Air Command's command and control worldwide exercise. Had it every year. All right. And there was some very interesting things that we did during that. We did a 5-ship Mito and KC-135 A models, the old water burners. Okay, that was crazy. Okay, and that we would fly out to Colorado where they would do their low levels, and then they'd have another 5-ship meet them on the way back post strike. But one time, we actually deployed for Global Guardian to what's the name of the place in Michigan? It's got a really nice range right next to it. Alpena, Michigan. So we went to Alpena, and we're living in like these dorms. Alpena used to be a training base during World War II, and so it still had a lot of facilities there. Not real modern, but they had them there. We had a chow hall, everything all set up. And so we had FB-111s and tanker A models on the ramp there. They couldn't bring water in, so all of our takeoffs were dry thrust. But we could still take off with a pretty good amount of water, or a pretty good amount of gas, excuse me. And we were flying. Hey, Jason, how are you? We were flying some pretty long missions from Alpena. But one day we flew a stream. We call it a stream, where you have like 3 KC-135s, 3 FB-111s, and the FB-111s would fly higher than us. We'd do what's called an en route descending rendezvous. So we'd be down here, and the FB-111s would come down out of their altitude and come under us. Okay, and that's pretty cool to watch as a 3-ship of tankers. Particularly as number 3. You can see the other 2 out in front of you, and everybody come down. Sorry to hear that, Jason. Hope you get better. Anyway, his call sign was Brother Mule, and the tower, he came back with some extra gas. Let's just say that. And not a demo pilot, but just a really good pilot. Brother Mule and I went to the same church. We were both LDS. Came back with a lot of gas. Okay. And I think he had to abort his mission. I can't remember for what, but anyway, comes back and immediately goes, too heavy to land. Can I just fly around for a little bit? And they go, and the tower at Alpena was very accommodating. And they're really funny guys too. I'm going to tell you 2 stories here. And they go, sure. What do you want to do? And Brother Mule and his nav go, can we do some simulated airfield attacks? Yeah, sure. What direction you want to come from? Well, what direction do you want us to come from? And they said, north, south, east, or west. And Brother Mule goes, okay. And so we heard him go by the first time down the runway. And he's about 300 feet. Now, 300 feet in FB 111, that's not unusual for an FB. They go down to 100 feet if they want to. But he goes down the runway, and he was doing an instrument approach and does this, go around and kind of taps burner as he's at the end of the runway, and then just pulls up and exits stage left. So we're kind of like, okay, where's he going? And then all of a sudden we hear him behind us, and we go, okay. And then we see him dive down again to like 300 feet. And then apparently he calls tower, okay, approaching from the west. And tower goes, okay, fine. And he came over the top of the airfield probably at about 300 feet and probably about 0.9 Mach. He was smoking. And then get over the runway, climbs up, okay. And of course, all of the airspace around Alpena, belongs to Alpena Tower. So, he smokes up to 5,000 feet, goes off to the east, turns north, comes back again, and basically just kind of beats up the pattern for a little while because he's got all this extra gas. Well, Brother Mule and his nav get down, and guess who's waiting for him when he shuts down? Yep, Squadron Commander. And they have words out on the ramp. And Brother Mule isn't on the schedule the next day, nor is nav. And you know what, folks? We're all like going, really? Really? But when you understand this particular squadron commander, you understood this is the way he operated, all right? Was Brother Mule breaking any regulations? No. Tower cleared him to do it. Was he doing something he wasn't supposed to? Not really. Back in the 80s, folks, you got to remember, we did a lot of stuff back in the 80s that you can't do now. A lot of stuff, okay? I'll give you a great example. Every February, in the 5 years that I was at Pease Air Force Base, 2 KC-135s and 4 FB-111s would do what we called off-station trainer out of Hill Air Force Base. The FBs would be at Hill. We'd land at the guard unit at Salt Lake International. And in the 80s, Jason, I'm talking 80. I got to Pease in 85. I was there through 90. Okay. And here was the great deal about Strategic Air Command. First of all, if you're a co-pilot, life was really good because you had what was called the ACE program, Accelerated Co-Pilot Enrichment. Too expensive to fly a KC-135 to get time. Pretty inexpensive to fly T-37s or T-38s. And so you had a detachment ours was from Vance Air Force Base. And we had about 5 T-37s that after mission planning, after you got so many hours, and I can't remember how much it was, 100 hours, 200 hours, you were put in this ACE program in an effort to build up your hours so that you could become an aircraft commander at 1,000. And the ACE program was absolutely a license to steal. All right. 2 co-pilots out flying around in the Northeast in a little 6,000 pound airplane. We call it the 6,000 pound dog whistle, the Tweet T-37. And the only restriction we had was the airfield had to have 5,000 feet of runway and a tower. Now, are we going into LaGuardia, places like that? No. Did a lot of approaches at Martha's Vineyard. Flew over Boston several times. I'm sorry, folks. I don't know what I've got stuck in my throat. All of you guys got me talking again. Kay Roberts, funny call signs. I could do a whole night on funny call signs. Anyway, back to the ACE program. So, we would 3-hop in the airplane. We'd take off from Pease, go to Martha's Vineyard, do approaches there, and land at Groton, Connecticut. And Groton, Connecticut, at the FBO there, they had this like hamburger place. Okay, it was very famous hamburger place. I can't remember the name of it now, but seriously, it was. They call it a cheeseburger club sandwich. Okay, and they use sourdough bread instead of a bun. All right, or no, excuse me, sourdough bun. So it was 3 patties tall with bacon, cheese, lettuce, tomato on each level. Okay. So it stood about this tall. Okay. About, what is that? 5 inches, 6 inches. Okay. Sorry, Brian. Didn't mean to do that to you. Hey, Michelle, welcome back. And so I was always like within 1 or 2 pounds, 3 or 4 pounds of my weight limit. I was born big, and I think the Air Force's weight management program was built on somebody that was like Skeletor, because we had guys that were just big. All right. Like me, I was 10 pounds, 14 ounces when I was born. And fortunately, we got a flight surgeon in later on who said, okay, we're going to do a bone density thing on all you guys that are like right on the edge. All right. And he gave me 10 extra pounds. All right. Because he said, dude, you're just big and you're always going to be big. Okay. You're not going to look like a runway model. Sorry, Sluggo. And anyway, so we'd get weighed in and we'd fly down to Groton, Connecticut and get one of these cheeseburger club sandwiches. You could get it with fries or onion rings and a drink about yay big here. Okay. And you can see this is a pretty good sized drink. Get our grease levels back up. Then we'd go up to Albany. Okay. And I've told you guys before, I never went into Albany when something really, really strange didn't happen. Every time I went into Albany, we called it Satan's playground for pilots, because every time we went there, man, something strange happened. Tower cleared a 727 to take off over the top of us while we were still rolling out on the runway once. I hydroplaned an airplane there one day, and we were literally going down the runway like this, about 30 degrees to the runway heading. I was looking out like this over the edge as we're sliding down the runway on water. It was just, welcome to Albany, Satan's playground for pilots. Anyway, so the ACE program, you did it till you got 1,000 hours, or you upgraded to aircraft commander. But that's how you got time, because it was just too expensive to do it in the tanker. The other great program that we had in the Strategic Air Command days, and I'm not following anything that I had on my agenda tonight. The other great thing that we did that Strategic Air Command had is everybody wanted to refuel. Everybody needed refueling training, particularly at night. And so we would do what was called off-station trainers. And they had a process for it. You had a series of forms you had to fill out. You had to go find crew chiefs that were willing to go. And of course, we had a lot of single crew chiefs, male and female, at the base that were like, sure, yeah, I'll go with you to Utah to go skiing. And you put in the paperwork. You had to put it in 60 days prior to the trip. You had to say, here's the crew that I'm taking with me. Here are the receivers that we have. Here's our training objectives. Here's the training beans we're going to do, like autopilot off air refueling at night, night landings at some place, night landings at a strange airfield. If you can call Salt Lake City International strange. Of course you could do them at Hill, Mountain Home, and all those other places too. And we just come out here in February, and 2 crews would fly the missions and 2 crews would ski, and then the next day they'd switch. It was great training. We had a crew that actually went down to Roosevelt Roads in Puerto Rico, NAS Roosevelt Roads, because they found out that the Navy was doing their workups down there, and the Navy said, none of us have drogue training, particularly a lot of the junior officers, which I talked about Tuesday. They don't have their drogue qualifications. And so they said, look, we'll come down there. We've got this thing called off-station trainer, and we'll fly every day if you want to. And, we'll even fly at night. Okay. And, Brian, I'll answer your question just in a second. Okay. And they went down to Roosevelt Roads for a week. And of course, they got down there, the air wing from the carriers there. So billeting was full. Guess where they ended up? In a hotel downtown on the beach. And the Air Force paid for it. The government paid for it. You pull out your government credit card and hand it to them. So these off-station trainers were really a license to steal, but they were great training because, we made the co-pilots. When I was an aircraft commander, I'd have my young co-pilots do most of the mission planning. Okay, how are we going to get out there? What are we going to do when we get there? What bases do we have around us that we can, do touch and goes at and approaches at and all those kinds of things. And it's just fun. It was just fun. You think you could do that now? Heck no. I don't ever remember. Let me make sure I'm saying this right. I do not remember being at Pease Air Force Base and ever running out of flying hours. Strategic Air Command just had buku flying hours. And again, they encouraged us to do this because you'd go off station and you'd fly at Roosevelt Roads, Salt Lake City International. Some guys would go down to Eglin, Florida, because the weapons folks down there always needed air refueling. All right. It was just one of those great places that you could go and be at Eglin Air Force Base, refuel all kinds of airplanes. Because the 53rd Test Wing down there had all kinds of airplanes, everything from A-10s all the way up to F-15Es, and you got to refuel them all. And they had some pretty cool exercises that they did down there too, particularly when they were first testing the AIM-120 AMRAAMs. Those were some really, really fascinating missions, with F-15s against aggressors, and the aggressors at that time were flying F-5. So, the peace dividend screwed everything up, man. That whole peace dividend thing, you know what? That was a sham. Peace dividend. Are you kidding me? So the Cold War closes in 1990. I leave Pease in 1990. All right. I leave in July. I'm on leave in Salt Lake for a month and then fly to LA. And then we fly on the rotator to Okinawa. We arrive on Okinawa the day Saddam invades Kuwait. So much for that peace dividend, huh? It's crazy. Don't get me started, man. Don't get me on my political soapbox. You won't like it. Brian Cooper, I have been at Guam, I don't know how many times. I can't count them. All right. Because when I was at Kadena in Okinawa, that was one of the places we lived. That's one of the places we went to all the time. And here's why. First of all, I think those Alpina Tower guys moved to Guam. All right. There was all kinds of stuff we could do down there. Agana had the international airport, which also had the Navy side of the ramp down at the international airport. But then, of course, Anderson Air Force Base is just freaking huge. You can park 120 airplanes on the ramp. There's 120 parking stubs. And they've made it bigger. There's actually more places to park now than there was back in the 70s and 80s when, the Vietnam War was going on and all this other stuff was going on in the Pacific. So, yeah, hey, Daddy, welcome. Welcome. I've not seen your name before, so welcome to Lessons from the Cockpit Bar Night. So the great thing about going to Guam was the airspace around it, which was massive. Okay. And the Farallon de Peñas Island. I think that was called Farallon something. It was a live drop range. And when I first got there, the 93rd Bomb Squadron was still on the island, a B-52 squadron. And Daddy, I appreciate that. I'm glad that you've watched a lot of those videos. I appreciate that. Stay with us because there's going to be some fun stuff tonight. We're talking about being on Guam. All right. But, the thing about Guam was you're out over international airspace. There's still training areas that you could use, but this island that to the north, I mean, they're still bombing even now. This Farallon de Medina, that's what it was, Farallon de Medina Island. And the B-52s, when they do the bomber task force, the B-52s, the B-2s, the B-1s, when they're there and they go on these training sorties, they'll load live weapons or captive weapons and go up there and drop like, a stick of 20 on this place. All right. There's a couple of places like this in the Pacific. There's one up by Korea. What did they call it? Chikdo Island, that they just have been pounding for years and years and years. I've got great video from F-16 HUD and the Lantern targeting pod of the 36 Fighter Squadron just dropping all kinds of stuff on Chikdo Island. Okay. And if you go, on YouTube here, I have some really good video that I found of different types of weapons impacting Chikdo Island. But Farallon de Medina is the same thing. You can go up there and drop live weapons on it. So the B-52s would fly, these 3 or 4 hour missions. We would refuel them because there was a air refueling track fairly close to it. And of course, if we wanted to, we could create an anchor area, a racetrack. And sure enough, man, we'd go out there and just have a great time. The runways are long, okay? And there's a really fascinating characteristic of the runway. It has a dip in the middle. If you go look at this, and there's a lot of video of this too. The runway goes down at a slight angle and then goes up at about a 5-degree angle. So here was the crazy thing. When we were flying in the KC-135A models, the water wagons, if we were doing a really, really heavy takeoff, your airspeed indicator would stagnate as you went from the downhill to the uphill. And sometimes it would stagnate at your decision speed, your S1 speed, which was really, really weird. Okay. Because you normally, the airspeed indicator just wraps up and keeps going. Okay. The airspeed indicator and a heavyweight A model, when you got to the bowl, as we called it, would actually stagnate. It would like stop. I never saw it go backwards, but it would just go slower because now you're going uphill. All right. And you're going, go baby, and then you'd rotate about, 2,000 feet from the end of the runway. All right. And you're bringing your gear up. You still got the flaps down because the water's running. And then you go over the cliff at the north end of the runways. And so your radio altimeter would go like this. It would make like a 700-foot jump. I think it's 735 feet from the top of the cliff down to the jungle below it. It was just one of those really weird things, you know. A heavyweight wet takeoff in a KC-135, and I've done a lot of them at Guam. Like I said, you'd see the airspeed kind of stagnate as you're transitioning from downhill, uphill in the bottom of the bowl, and then going off the end and seeing your radial altimeter go like this and make this big jump. But you know what the coolest thing was? Is flying low out over the ocean. And one of the really cool things was the Guam controllers, Brian, they called it the Pineapple Tour. And basically they would fly you around the island and they'd point things out to you. They said, hey, you guys want the Pineapple Tour? Is this your first time here? Do you want the Pineapple Tour? And of course, you know, you go, oh, we'd love to. And so they'd take you down to 500 feet and bring you in close to the island. And they'd point out, you know, all the landmarks, you know, all the places that they would tell you to go to while you were there. There's a place called Telefofo Falls, which is really cool. The water's really warm, you know, particularly after it rains. The Telefofo Falls, about a 30-foot drop from the top into the big pool of water, and it's really long. Okay, it was quite wide, and so you go out there and go swimming. Instead of swimming in the ocean, you go to Telefofo Falls, and a lot of people did it. A lot of tourists went there, and I mean, it's just crazy. And Coco's Island had this great big resort on it that all the Japanese would come to. They would tell us that the Japanese folks that couldn't afford to go to Honolulu would come to Guam. And the thing they liked about coming to Guam was there were a whole bunch of these places where you could rent guns and shoot, indoor shooting ranges. Those became really popular while I was there. So I flew A models for the first year I was at Kadena, and flew during Desert Storm. And when we got back from Desert Storm, the R model tankers that were going to go to the 509th Air Refueling Squadron at Pease, where I had come from, went to Kadena, and we transitioned to 15 KC-135R models, which was fantastic. R models are just such a great jet. You know, I understand, man, 60 years old or more, and they're just absolutely a great jet. Okay. Yeah, TV at Kadena sucked. Yeah, you're right. There wasn't much TV there. All right. I never flew out of Norton, Wayne. I never went into Norton either, which is kind of unusual. We'd always go to March because March had tanker units there, had KC-135s and KC-10s there. So whenever we were doing transpac missions, what we call transpac missions, where you'd meet up with fighters and you take them to Hawaii, then from Hawaii to Guam, Guam to either Kadena or to the Korean Peninsula, we always did it out of March Air Force Base. All right. And of course, I don't know if you guys know it. I think it's the 405 freeway has a bridge at the end of the runway. And when you're flying A models, you went over the top of that bridge at about 300 feet. Okay. You'd level off and go, you know, the A models, you had to bring the flaps up before you ran out of water, 125 seconds of water. And you'd level off and fly over the top of that bridge. And it didn't shock the tanker guys, but anybody that flew with you saw that. There was an F-117 guy that was flying a night refueling mission, you know, and one of my friends told me that he just had this white knuckle grip on the back of the pilot and co-pilot's seat. And he says, is this the way it always is? And they're like, yeah, this is the way it always is. Every time we take off heavyweight to come up with you guys. So, yeah, it was great. Oh yeah. Our model was a possibility of scraping an engine. Yeah. All the time. And what they did, Supreme Eater, was the accessory gearbox on the CFM56 is on the bottom, and Strategic Air Command says, no, you got to move it sideways. You got to move it outboard to the left. All right. And they took off the thrust reversers. Okay. Increased the price of the engines. And it was pretty significant jump too. I've never seen a pod scrape. I was never involved in a pod scrape. And I had a really, really good instructor that taught me how to land in crosswinds and make sure I never scraped a pod. Okay. And it was by rudders, push a little bit on the rudder. All right. Some people would come down the crab. All right. And I'm one of those guys. I'd come down, kind of weather vaning into the wind. All right. And as I was getting ready to round out to land, I would straighten the nose out and go wing low. All right. And I never scraped a pod. I was pod proofed by this instructor because of the techniques he told me to use. He said, you'll never scrape a pod if you do these things. And even in high winds. And I've had one landing that I know I'll always regret the rest of my life, where I landed hard with 2 Gs, but I didn't scrape a pod. Okay. I came straight down, coming back from a typhoon evac. Okay. And I'll get into that in just a second. Coming back from a typhoon evac, and they called the winds in limits when they were probably out. And I came in, and a big gust of wind took all the lift out from underneath the airplane, and I dropped it from about 30 feet. And we just went, wham, onto the runway. Hard landing procedure is don't bring up the gear. Boom operator goes back, opens the little portholes so they can inspect them, the main struts. Okay. There's little windows that you can look down. We use them when we're manually extending the gear to make sure they're down and locked. And again, if you have a hard landing, you can inspect the gear. And the struts were bleeding. I had broken the seals, and so hydraulic fluid was leaking down the struts because I put 2 Gs. Actually, I think in the investigation they said 2.2, and that's a hard landing. Okay. Anyway, you leave the gear down, declare an emergency, come in and land, and they have to impound the airplane because of the possibility of gear damage. Obviously, they have to do this whole inspection on the gear mounting points, and the wings. I found out. Okay. Because obviously the wings flex when you hit that hard. So when you hit the runway that hard, the wings flex downward. And so they had to look for cracks. Didn't find any cracks. They did all the maintenance they could on the gear, pumped it back full of fluid. Then you do what's called a dummy retract. And that's where they jack the airplane up and put a hydraulic cart on the airplane that pressurizes the hydraulics. And you do like 10 to 15 swings of the gear, gear up, gear down, gear up, gear down, just to make sure that all the clearances are right and everything. And that, and it does what it's supposed to do. Oh, good question, Brian. How many beers for the ground crew? I don't think I gave him anything, to tell you the truth. Here's why. Brian. You could feel the airplane drop out. If you've been in an elevator and all of a sudden goes down, you get that light feeling, on your feet. Amplify that about 10 times. That's what it felt like. You could feel the airplane dropping out from underneath it. So as soon as I felt the airplane dropping out from underneath me, I did the go around procedures immediately. All right. As soon as I felt that elevator drop sensation. Okay. Remember, I've told you guys, you do fly with your 5 senses, to include your sense of smell and hearing. And as soon as I felt the bottom dropping out, I immediately went to go around. Okay. Pickle, power, speed brakes, flaps to 30. All right. I still remember it. Pickle is on the yoke, and what it does, it gives you all the go around commands in the flight director system. Okay, and as soon as I did all that, I was in the landing attitude. You hold the landing attitude as the book says, and we just hit, boom, and I had the chief of standardization evaluation evaluator pilot literally sitting in the jump seat next to me, between my co-pilot and I, and she didn't say a word. And we hit, we bounced, but I already had the power up, and it took a little while for the power to catch, but it finally did, and we started climbing out. Well, the problem was the wind's blowing from right to left, like 25, 30 knots. And so you have to just maintain the landing attitude. You don't try and turn, you don't try and do anything else. And it blew us over the infield, over the grass, and then over the taxiway. And we were still climbing. I'm in an R model, but we basically went down over the top of the ramp. All right. I just maintained the landing attitude. All right. And we were climbing out at a pretty good rate. We weren't going to hit anything. We had the F-15 bird bath that, and I'm sure you guys have seen pictures of this. The F-15s have to get washed every once in a while. The fighters have to get washed, and they go through this high pressure. It's like this big, like, bridge thing that they drive underneath it, and it gives them this high pressure power wash as they do it. And so, we're going over all that and everything. A little scary, but at least we're climbing out. We had about 700 feet per minute up and everything like that. And I went to 200 knots. Whatever I'm going to do, if I'm going to move the airplane, I'm going to have serious airspeed on the airplane. And the flaps at 30, I think I could go up to 220. So I was safe. Yeah, Wayne, the Santa Ana winds, same thing. Okay. Blowing like crazy. Anyway, got out outside downwind. I said, okay, first of all, is everybody okay? Everybody's fine. Okay. The boom operator says, I have to go to the chiropractor to get my spine adjusted. That was a terrible landing, Captain. Yeah, thanks for that. We all laughed. I had a great crew. And then I got on outside downwind. I said, okay, let's do the, hard landing checklist. Okay. And there was actually a checklist for it. And we did it all. And sure enough, the boom operator says, hey, struts are bleeding. Oh, crap. Okay. Got it. Leave the gear down, declare an emergency. And you have to tell them the airspeed, the amount of G's, and the attitude that you hit the ground at. And so I was at about 4 degrees, 3 degrees nose up attitude. We're going about 146 knots, and put 2 G's on the airplane, which you write up in the forms. Okay. And that's a standard thing for a hard landing. And then they took the airplane out of the, off the line, and did what they needed to do to check it all out. And 4 days later, it was back flying again. So I'm telling you, folks, the Pacific flying at Kadena was my greatest flying assignment by far. Not because of the flying, although that was a big part of it, but because of what I learned. Not only learned about flying the airplane, but learned about myself and what I was truly capable of. It wasn't too long after this, I became an instructor pilot. My evaluator was Ron, who was known to be an absolute by the book stickler, one of the hardest grading evaluator pilots in the 909th. Happened to be my next door neighbor. Okay. A lot of people goes, oh, he passed it because you're a next door neighbor. No, he actually gave me a very, very good evaluation. And he says, you did really, really well on your first instructor check. And, getting in the books and talking to students about, look, let's take a look at the book, what it says. So being an instructor pilot, and then coming home from Desert Storm and everything, where I'd done all this planning, I got put in wing plans and weapons, which was absolutely the funnest job I had. I got to fly. I got my hand in war planning. I got my hand in special access programs, special access required programs, SAPSAR. Because remember, everybody needs gas. Got to run an exercise that I still can't talk about with a group of folks that have to remain nameless because I've got, I think it's 2 more years on the paperwork that I signed in the 90s. Just a lot of fun. Even when I was in the Pacific, never saw a UFO. Came really close to a lot of airliners though, because somebody up there asked, about the RC-135. We did a lot of RC-135 missions. I have a picture of the ramp at Kadena where I have all 3 versions of the RC-135 on the ramp, all of them flying real world missions. And that soaks up 6 tankers because you have to have a primary and a manned spare for every RC-135 mission. We had the rivet joint. We had the on the ramp, and it was always deployed there doing missions. We had the Cobra ball on the ramp because the North Koreans were launching ballistic missiles, and we also had what's called the combat scent, which is the scientific version of the RC-135 that goes out and collects really, really precise electrons that they use for, figuring out, okay, chaff bundles, how to program ECM pods, things like that. And all 3 were flying active missions. We actually ran out of flying time at Kadena that one year. Our wing commander said to PACAF headquarters, I am locking the 909th Air Refueling Squadron doors on the 1st of July. Locking it. And because we had 220 additional taskings that we never got flying time for. And of course, we went to PACAF and said, what are you guys doing? Are you guys like in some like billionaire boys club out there flying these airplanes all over everywhere? And then we took the actual missions that we've been tasked with, some of them out of Diego Garcia, and showed them this is why we ran out of flying hours in June. And they went, oh, okay, got it. So the Cobra ball, Jason, that's how'd you find that, Jason? As a matter of fact, Cobra ball, 662 is over the Sea of Japan as we're sitting here. So it's over the Sea of Japan, then it's probably doing stuff. Is it north of Japan or is it east of North Korea? Because that's how you tell. That's how you tell who it's watching. Okay. If ever you hear about ballistic missiles being used, employed, shot somewhere, the Cobra ball is somewhere close by. Over in the Middle East, with ballistic missiles coming out of the Houthis, ballistic missiles coming out of Iran, there's a Cobra ball there somewhere. And the intelligence information that you get from the Cobra ball is extremely precise and what we call target quality. And that should tell you all you need to know. Okay. East of North Korea, about 50 miles off the Japan coast, far north. East of North Korea, about 50 miles off the Japan coast, far north. It's probably watching something the North Koreans doing. No, it's not classified. Michelle, you're fine. We don't have to kill you. Michelle, I've been in the back of all 3 airplanes, all 3 RC-135s. And it is just amazing what they all do. Okay. So you're safe. Okay. And like you see, Michelle, Jason was able to find it where it's flying around. Okay. And I bet you if we brought it up, it's probably in some racetrack pattern. They do a lot of waiting, obviously. But no, we're not going to shave her head, Brian. It's been in the news that Kim Jong-un has said, you're not giving me enough attention. I may start, launching missiles again. You don't have anything to worry about. Michelle, your wedding will go off just fine, sir. Yeah, go to your wedding. You'll be fine. Okay. Because you have to remember, Michelle, we can shoot them down. If you know what I mean. Whose wedding are you going to, Michelle? Member of the family, friend? I'm just curious. Yeah, Michelle, we love having you here. Okay. You are the only female that's ever joined us. Biological computers with mushrooms. Never heard of that. Oh, your youngest son who had cancer. Oh. Yeah, don't get me started. Those of you who've read my book, and Michelle, I know you have it, and have read the epilogue and what happened in our family. So, Michelle, is he in remission? I'm just curious, Michelle. And hopefully he's doing well. Hopefully he's doing well. Yeah, congratulations to you and your family, Michelle. Oh, yeah, I know it's complicated. For those of you who don't know, and those of you who have my book, I mention in the epilogue that one of the things that the military has taught me is resilience, patience, and not a patient man, resilience, patience, and compassion. And unfortunately, in 2009, we knew our son was sick. We knew something was wrong. I'll just say that. We knew something was wrong. Okay. God. We knew something was wrong. Jeffrey would take 2-hour naps, and it was very tough to wake him up. He would just get exhausted. And that was very, very unusual for Jeffrey. He wanted to go to a scout camp. We said, I don't think so, bud. And he goes, come on, let me go. Okay. And I dropped him off. I said, I do not want to get a phone call that you're hurt. About 2 hours later, I got a phone call. He was hurt. We didn't know how bad until the ER doc took me in and showed me the x-ray. Jeffrey had an osteosarcoma lesion in the upper portion of his left arm, just below the shoulder growth plate. That was the size of a fist. And he'd broken the arm through the tumor because that was the weak point. He had a bike accident. 14 months, 6 months, he was doing fine. They had to amputate the arm at the shoulder. You always think, what are you going to do with your son, one-armed kid? He was back on his skateboard 7 days after he had surgery to remove his arm. Still had the staples and the stitches in it. He's doing real good for 6 months. This was September. And then in April, we noticed a little lump about like that big in his shoulder where he had the amputation. And no, Michelle, don't apologize. You don't need to apologize. Okay. At all. And we'll just cover this very quickly. Anyway, metastatic osteosarcoma, you do not come back from, and he didn't. And he died on August 10th of 2010. And the only way I could have got through that ordeal is because of some of the discipline practices and things that I learned while I was on active duty. Anyway. Hey, Dave, welcome. Thanks for reading my book, Dave. It was up there for a second, and then it left. And again, if you read the epilogue, you know, there's a couple lines about, you know, our family's worst period of time. And Dave, thank you for those kind words. I really appreciate that. Dave, are you in Australia now? Yeah, I appreciate that. Michelle, Jeffrey passed away on my youngest son, Travis's birthday. I was at Red Robin with Travis celebrating his birthday when Val texted me, said he's crashing, and he was. And he actually died on my youngest son's birthday. Where in Australia are you, Dave? May I say something about the Australians, particularly the Royal Australian Air Force? They were part of the coalition for the Shock and Awe campaign. And I have never worked with a finer group of Air Force absolute masterminds than when I was working the RAF. We asked the RAAF, to do some very, very tough missions, particularly with our special forces guys, SEAL teams, Delta Force, everything. And they took on those missions with gladness. And so, Dave, I can't say enough good things about the Royal Australian Air Force and the things that you have done for the Americans. Their primary mission planning leader was a lieutenant colonel. And I think I've told you guys this. He had a master's degree in quantum physics. One of the smartest people I've ever met. Okay. You wouldn't think that when you first meet him and see him on a street corner, because he looked like he was half asleep. And it's just the way he looked, you know, it's just, anyway, truly one of those great people that I worked with was the Australians. And I got to meet, Dave, a bunch of your SAS bubbas too, working on some of the missions that they were doing. And they integrated very, very well with all the stuff that we were doing. Okay. John Gong, I saw that. John says Duke Cunningham passed away yesterday. He'd been ill for a long time. And last year when I saw his Rio, Willie Driscoll, at Tailhook, I asked him, I said, how's Duke doing? He goes, he's going downhill. So a lot of people are surprised he lasted this long. So anyway, Jason, sorry you got to leave, man. And hope you're feeling better. Okay. Yeah, the Aussie SAS guy, they were fantastic, and they jumped right into some of the hardest missions. Okay. Kincaid, welcome back. There were so many things that I learned while I was in the Pacific, and it set me up for later on in my career to do and get to do some of the things that I was able to do, particularly when it came time to put together the weapon school, the KC-135 weapon school syllabus, because I had done CSAR exercises, combat search and rescue exercises, air defense exercises, anti-ballistic missile exercises. We had 3 F-15 squadrons, the AWACS squadron, us, the helicopter squadron. I put on, and this was a chapter I didn't put in the book. I wish I had. The exercise was called ZZ Top, and we had almost every organization on the base playing except for the Marines because they were getting ready to leave, and they said, "We're leaving that week. We can't get involved." And I said, "Yeah, okay, whatever." And that was one of those experiences where I thought I was bulletproof. My communication organizational skills were tested to the max, and we came off victorious. And a matter of fact, the other F-15 planner and I both got Air Force Achievement Medals for putting on this exercise. I'll have to tell you about that exercise sometime, folks, because it was massive. We had a carrier battle group that was participating in it. Our helicopter squadron had transitioned from the old H-3 Sikorsky H-3s to the new MH-60s, HH-60 Pavehawks. And the one thing that kept them from being mission ready that we had to put uh, a waiver in for a year, they didn't have their ship quals. So I had a weapons school graduate. They have a helicopter school, a helicopter division. I said, what should we do here? And one of the things he threw in there, he said, we need to get ship quals. I said, his call sign was Poison. I said, Poison, I'm not following you. I'm not tracking with you. And he goes, the one thing that's keeping us from our true mission qualification is none of us have flown on or off a ship. And I said, well, this will be easy because obviously they've got helicopters on the cruisers, on the destroyers, on the carrier. And so they did an interfly with one of the carrier helicopter squadrons that got all of the 33rd Rescue Squadron ship qualled on cruisers and on carrier decks, day and night. And they had to do like 8 landings during the day and then 8 landings at night on the carrier to get their ship quals. They did it behind the cruiser and the Aegis cruiser too. And there's not a lot of room back there. Okay. And Poison told me when he did this, and again, he's a weapons school grad. He's going, yeah, that was that got my blood pumping to do night NVG landing on the back of an Aegis cruiser. But that's what they had to do to get their ship quals. Okay. Landing on the carrier deck, it's 4 acres. It's big. It's not a problem. Landing behind the cruiser, a little different. And so one of the great things was our ops group commander got to write to PACAF headquarters and say, hey, our 33rd Rescue Squadron is now a full up round. They got their ship quals, day and night ship quals. Pretty cool stuff. Ooh, LHAs and 53s, Wayne. That's LHA is a very fascinating ship. So what Wayne's talking about that is the large deck amphibs, okay? And Wayne, I've been on the Iwo Jima because it was stationed in Norfolk where I was assigned for 3 years. And I took one of our classes from the Joint Forces Staff College on the USS Iwo Jima. Matter of fact, I've got a hat from the Iwo Jima. That was amazing, Wayne, particularly down in the well deck. And what the well deck is to all of you, the back of the amphibious assault ship, particularly the large deck ones, they've got this big gate that flops down. And they literally flood the back end of the ship. And, there's a lot of buoyancy issues going on here that they have to counterbalance and everything so that the ship is still laying flat in the water, but it's sunk down a little bit so that they have water in the back end of the ship in the well deck with this gate down. All right. And then the amphibious vehicles all go out the back. They have the hovercraft one. They've got the armored ones, everything. It's really amazing to see. And I can't remember which one, Wayne, but one of the large deck amphibs was part of the rescue battle group that went down for Hurricane Katrina. They literally followed the hurricane up into the Gulf of Mexico. And there was a large deck amphib south of New Orleans, Nolans, and south of Biloxi, because you've got this big, huge deck, helicopters are going back and forth. But the coolest thing was, and this is how this worked, it was great. They could triage like 1,500 people on that one main deck, Wayne, and say, yep, surgery, ambulatory, all those kinds of things. And they were bringing people from shore. Okay. Oh, the Peleliu. Yeah, that's one of them. One of the big ones. And I can't remember which ones they sent down there when. I think Iwo Jima was one of them. Anyway, it became a floating hospital and airport. And of course, it's got air traffic control. It's got planning areas. And the cool thing, Wayne, that I thought was really crazy was in the middle, and I can't remember which deck it's on, in the middle of it, they had those 4 operating rooms where they could literally do all the way up to brain surgery. They had neurosurgeons on board because, combat, you could get shot anywhere. And they were bringing people from shore in Louisiana and Mississippi and actually working on them on the Navy ships. And, folks, this is something that a lot of people don't talk about and haven't heard a lot about it. Okay. They've heard of Hurricane Katrina and all the damage it did to Louisiana and Mississippi. They've heard of all the people that died because of it. But Admiral Kilkenny actually set up a grid, like a kill box grid that we use to hunt tanks and armies with. He called it rescue boxes. And they'd start checking them all off. The helicopters would go to each one and hunt all the houses, and they'd find people on the tops of the houses. And they would search the houses, and they would actually spray paint on the roofs, like 2R and 3D. Okay. 2R rescued, 3 dead. All right. And collect the bodies. But they would fly folks out to these ships and literally bring them back to life in some cases, because you had every type of surgeon and doctor, dentists, everything on these large deck amphibs. And Wayne, how many helicopters can you plant on that thing? Is there like 9 landing spots, Wayne? 8 or 9 landing spots? Was there for that during CAT. MH-53 worked great. Oh yeah, I can imagine the 53, with all of its sensors and everything flying around at night. Of course, everybody's on night vision goggles too. But folks, it was one of the most, I've talked about compassion already tonight, and military compassion. And this was one of the greatest examples of how the military can show compassion by setting up these 2 large deck amphibs, again, one south of New Orleans, one south of Biloxi. Oh, they were doing all the air traffic control for the helicopters, and they had 2 E-2 Hawkeyes that were airborne 24 hours, okay, flying out of Barksdale, that was controlling all of it. And they literally set it up like kill boxes, like we do when we're hunting tanks and army folks on the ground, because that's what they knew, 9-line. And they created a rescue 9-line that they'd go find all these people. It's one of the most amazing stories. And Admiral Kilkenny spoke like the following year at one of the big Navy symposiums. And he got up and he had slides and he showed all this. It was amazing, folks, the amount of people that they were able to save from this. And of course, the Abraham Lincoln was over in the Far East when they had the big tsunami too, and it did the same thing. Anyway, hey, Daddy, have a good night, man. Take care to you too. And thanks for joining us tonight. This is the first time I've seen your name, and I really appreciate you joining us. Okay. All right, folks, I got to go. And, here it is. almost 9 o'clock here where I live. I'm Mountain Standard Time. I haven't eaten today, except for my ice cubes, Wayne. Thank you all for being here once again. Next week, next Tuesday, I will be attending a concert in Boston. And then I will be at the Pease Air Force Base, Air National Guard Base Air Show beginning Thursday through Sunday. So I will be kind of offline. I'll try to I'll try to do a live from Pease on Thursday as I'm walking around. Okay, I don't know how long it'll be. I'll try and do it in the afternoon or evening, but I'm going to be on the road next week. Okay. I have a great opportunity to go to this concert. My son is in the music industry, and this trip just happens to overlap with his crew being in Boston. So we're going to get to see my son, who we don't get to see very much of, and then attend the Thunder over New Hampshire Air Show. The Blue Angels are performing at the Pease show, and they put on a better show than the T-Birds, in my opinion. I will be in Atlanta from the 19th through the 25th, attending the Military Influencers Conference. And then I will be at the Andrews Air Force Base Air Show also. So anybody in the Washington, D.C. area or that's close to Andrews Air Force Base, I will be on the ramp, particularly at the C-54, the Berlin Airlift Historical Foundation C-54. Come find me there. I would love to shake your hand, talk to you, and even show you around the airplane, okay? So that's where I'll be for the next couple weeks, all right? Thanks again for joining. Sluggo out here.